Karen's obsession with the HOA was well known in the neighborhood. Every morning, she'd patrol the streets, ensuring no one's grass was too long or their trash bins weren't placed in the correct position. Her primary mission was to maintain control. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was out of her watchful eye. When a package was delivered to a neighbor's house, she noticed it immediately. It wasn't that Karen had any reason to be suspicious. There was nothing unusual about the package. But to Karen, the mundane was always suspect. She peered through the blinds, watching as the mailman dropped off the box at the front door. Her mind started racing. Who would be getting a package at this hour? Was it legal? Was it some sort of contraband? Was the neighbor involved in something nefarious? Without a second thought, she marched over to the neighbor's house, carefully avoiding the notice of anyone in the area. She slipped past their driveway, and with a quick glance over her shoulder, snatched the package from the doorstep. With the stealth of a burglar, she carried it back to her home, making sure no one saw her. If anyone asked, she was just looking out for the neighborhood, being a good citizen. She set the package down on her kitchen table, eyeing it with suspicion. The label was unremarkable, just a name, an address, and a tracking number. But Karen wasn't fooled by simple labels. She tapped her fingers against the box, contemplating her next move. Perhaps there was something hidden inside. Maybe it wasn't a regular delivery. Maybe it was something dangerous. It had to be. It couldn't just be a harmless parcel like it seemed. After a few minutes of deliberation, she grabbed a letter opener and sliced through the tape with the precision of a surgeon. As she peeled back the layers of packing material, her eyes narrowed, searching for something, anything that could confirm her suspicions. Finally, she uncovered the contents, a set of prescription bottles neatly packed inside a plastic bag. At first, she was relieved. It didn't look like anything illegal. But Karen wasn't one to stop there. She noticed a small label on one of the bottles. It had the name of a pharmacy and a tiny symbol she couldn't quite make out. She squinted, reading the small print. Tracking number, controlled substance, high surveillance. Her eyes widened in horror. She didn't know exactly what it meant, but it sounded serious. And that was all the confirmation she needed. She paced back and forth, holding the bottle in her hands, trying to piece everything together. This is it, she muttered to herself. They're doing something illegal, and I've caught them. I'm saving this neighborhood. The realization hit her like a rush of adrenaline. She wasn't just a homeowner worried about her community. She was now a hero, someone who would go down in history as the one who uncovered a criminal plot. The thought of getting this information to the authorities filled her with excitement. She picked up her phone, dialing the local police. As the phone rang, her thoughts began to race again. Was she overreacting? What if they thought she was crazy? She quickly dismissed the thought. No, this was important. She had to act fast. The police needed to know what was happening. If she didn't intervene, who would? When the officer answered, she didn't hesitate. Hello, officer? I have a very serious situation. I've intercepted a package that's clearly part of an illegal operation. It's a prescription shipment with a government surveillance tag, tracking narcotics. It's all here. She said this in a voice full of self-assuredness, as though she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed in her head. The officer, obviously confused, asked her to describe the package and its contents. As Karen relayed the details, she could hear the skepticism in the officer's voice. He asked if she was sure, if the medication was something dangerous. She was quick to assure him it was. It's definitely something criminal, she insisted, the sense of victory in her words. I'm just doing my civic duty. You need to come here right away. The officer promised to send someone over, but Karen wasn't satisfied. She kept pacing, waiting for the arrival of the authorities, feeling the power rush through her veins. She had single-handedly thwarted an illegal operation, and soon, everyone would know it. She could already picture the neighborhood's gratitude, the respect she'd gain as the fearless protector of her street. But as she waited, doubt began to creep into her mind. What if she was wrong? What if it was just a misunderstanding? She quickly silenced these thoughts. No. Karen was never wrong. She had the evidence, and she was going to expose it. When the police arrived, she'd be vindicated. She imagined the news coverage. Local hero saves neighborhood from dangerous criminals. The headlines practically wrote themselves. She couldn't wait to tell everyone how she'd saved the day. It would be the crowning moment of her HOA career. People would finally see her as the warrior she was, the one who stood up against wrongdoing in her community. As she waited, her mind raced with thoughts of how to present her discovery. She was already mentally rehearsing the conversation with the police officers. But still, there was a small, nagging voice in her head reminding her that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't thought this through. But Karen pushed it aside. She wasn't going to let doubt stop her now. She was going to be a hero. Karen paced in her living room, the phone still clutched tightly in her hand. She couldn't sit still. Her mind was racing with thoughts of what would happen when the police arrived. How would they react? Would they be impressed by her diligence? Or would they doubt her? She couldn't afford to let them think she was overreacting. The stakes were too high. She had to be the one to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. After what seemed like an eternity, the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. She quickly opened the door, her expression a mixture of triumph and determination. The officer standing there looked confused but polite. He held a small notepad and pen, ready to jot down whatever Karen had to say. "Officer, thank you for coming. I've found something serious. A criminal operation right in our neighborhood," she said with an urgent tone. "Come inside. I've already isolated the package." The officer stepped inside, clearly unsure of what to expect. Karen led him to the kitchen, where the package sat, still unclaimed. She gestured dramatically toward it, as though unveiling a great treasure. "This is it," she said. "Prescription narcotics, tracked by the government, right here in our neighborhood. Who knows what they were planning with this? I was just doing my duty when I intercepted it." The officer looked at the package, his expression not quite matching the gravity Karen had assigned to it. "Ma'am, are you sure about this? It looks like a simple prescription bottle." He picked it up, turning it over in his hands with little interest. "But it's not just any prescription," Karen insisted, practically jumping up and down. "It has a government surveillance tag. They're tracking it. This is bigger than you think." The officer raised an eyebrow, his skepticism growing. "A government surveillance tag, you say?" He flipped the bottle over, examining it with more scrutiny. "I don't see anything that indicates this is part of any tracking system." Karen's frustration bubbled up, but she forced herself to remain calm. "It's there. Look closer. This is the kind of thing criminals use to stay under the radar. I'm telling you, this isn't just some ordinary medication." The officer took out his phone and snapped a quick picture of the bottle, still nonplussed. "We'll need to check with the pharmacy, verify if it's legitimate. But I don't think there's anything criminal here, ma'am. You might be overreacting a bit." Karen's face reddened. "I'm not overreacting," she practically shouted. "I'm saving this entire neighborhood from danger. You don't understand what's going on here." The officer sighed, his patience wearing thin. "Ma'am, I'll check into it. But I have to tell you, this sounds like a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Karen nearly screamed, her voice quivering with indignation. "This is no misunderstanding. It's a crime in the making. If you don't act fast, more people will be hurt." She was starting to feel the weight of her self-proclaimed righteousness crumbling under the officer's calm demeanor. "All right, I'll make some calls," the officer said, clearly trying to wrap up the encounter as quickly as possible. "But in the meantime, you should probably get in touch with the Postal Service and let them know about the situation. They'll help us track this down further." Karen was nearly shaking with frustration as the officer turned and walked toward the door. "No! This is bigger than the Postal Service. You can't just let it go like that." But the officer was already gone, his steps slow and steady as he made his way out of her house, leaving Karen standing there with her mind racing. She wasn't ready to let this go. She couldn't. If the authorities weren't going to take it seriously, then it was up to her to finish what she started. She grabbed the package, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. What if she was wrong? What if this really was just a normal delivery? No, Karen couldn't think like that. She wasn't wrong. She had to be right. She had the evidence. She would expose this and become the hero she was destined to be. The thought of the entire neighborhood finally seeing her as the protector she was, someone who was willing to put everything on the line for their safety, filled her with determination. With renewed purpose, she stormed out of her house and across the street, knocking on the door of her neighbor, the one who was supposedly the recipient of the package. She had no idea if the neighbor was home, but she couldn't wait for another moment. This had to end, and it had to end now. The neighbor answered, looking completely shocked to see Karen standing there, brandishing the package. "What is this?" the neighbor asked, clearly confused. "I'm here to save you," Karen blurted. "You've been targeted by criminals. This package contains tracked narcotics, and I've already called the police. You're in danger, and I'm the only one who can protect you." The neighbor stared at her for a moment, trying to process what she had just said. "Karen, what the hell are you talking about? That's just my prescription." Karen's face turned pale. She glanced at the package again, her fingers trembling. "Your prescription?" She opened it one last time, the reality of her mistake sinking in. The tracking number was for a legitimate pharmacy. It was a legitimate prescription. No surveillance tag. No government conspiracy. Just a simple bottle of medication. For a long moment, Karen stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to say something, to explain herself, but nothing came out. The ridiculousness of it all hit her like a wave. She had made a fool of herself. The silence hung in the air, thick with embarrassment. Karen stood there, the package still clutched in her shaking hands, as the neighbor stared at her in disbelief. Her mouth opened and closed, but the words just wouldn't come. She had spent hours, no days, convinced that she was about to expose a criminal conspiracy. Now, the entire thing was falling apart in front of her. "Karen, what the hell is going on?" the neighbor asked, voice tinged with confusion and mild amusement. "This is just my medication. It's nothing special." Karen's mind raced, but her feet remained rooted to the ground. She tried to come up with something, anything, to explain this. Her hands trembled, but she still clung to the package as though it held the answer to her chaotic blunder. I didn't know," she stammered, unable to find the words that would restore her pride. "I thought it was. Obviously," the neighbor interrupted, crossing their arms. "You were way off. Did you call the cops?" Karen's eyes flickered toward the phone on her table. "Yes, I did," she said with an awkward chuckle. I thought it was something dangerous. You know, with the tracking and all. But this isn't what I thought it was." The neighbor sighed, clearly unimpressed. "Well, it's too late now. I'm sure the cops have already heard all this nonsense." They turned to walk back inside, not even bothering to give Karen a second glance. "Thanks for nothing." Karen stood there, frozen, as her neighbor slammed the door behind them. She wanted to scream, to explain, to make things right. But she knew deep down there was nothing she could do now. Her entire investigation had turned into a farce, and it was all her fault. As she trudged back to her own house, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone in the neighborhood would soon find out about her failure. The gossip would spread like wildfire. She could already hear the whispers. "Karen's lost it. She's completely lost it." Back inside, she sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. What now? She thought of the police officer's face when she had called them earlier, his barely contained amusement as she explained the situation. He had been polite, professional, but she could tell he wasn't taking her seriously. He'd probably laughed about it with his colleagues after hanging up. After all, who could blame him? She had just wasted everyone's time. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from another neighbor, one who had always been a little too friendly with her. "Heard about the package," it said. "You really did a number on that one, huh?" Karen squeezed her eyes shut, feeling the weight of the shame settle in. There was no denying it, she had screwed up, and now the whole neighborhood knew. The thought of facing the judgment of her fellow homeowners made her stomach churn. They would never look at her the same way again. She was the HOA Karen. The one who went too far, the one who let her suspicions get the best of her. The neighborhood watch hero who had mistaken a prescription delivery for a criminal operation. She could almost hear them laughing already. Karen, the overzealous busybody, always stepping where she wasn't wanted, always poking her nose into other people's business. She had made a fool of herself, and now everyone would know it. A knock at the door pulled her out of her spiral. With dread creeping up her spine, she slowly made her way over to the door and opened it. Standing there was the same officer who had visited earlier, this time with a colleague. "Ma'am," the officer began, his tone flat and professional. "We need to talk." Karen opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She had nothing left to say. The moment she opened her mouth, the officer would know that she had truly lost her mind. She stepped aside and let them in, knowing full well that this wasn't going to end well for her. The officers walked inside, and the second officer immediately made a beeline for the package still sitting on her kitchen table. "So," he said, glancing at the contents. "This is it, huh?" Karen nodded silently. She wasn't going to explain herself anymore. The officers had already seen enough to know how ridiculous this entire situation had become. "Ma'am, I have to tell you," the officer continued, "this is a prescription medication. It's legal. It's nothing that requires investigation. You were mistaken." Karen's face flushed with heat as she stood there, staring at the floor. Her hands fidgeted nervously, but she didn't respond. She had nothing to say. Everything she had believed, everything she had done, had been for nothing. "At this point," the officer said, "we can consider the case closed. But I suggest, in the future, you leave these matters to the professionals. You don't want to get into a situation where you're wasting people's time." Karen nodded, too ashamed to speak. She couldn't meet the officer's eyes, couldn't bear the weight of the situation. This was it, the moment she'd been avoiding. Her neighbors were going to hear about this, and when they did, they wouldn't let her live it down. The officers left without another word, and as the door clicked shut behind them, Karen sat down, staring blankly at the walls. She had gone too far. She had let her obsession with control, with proving her superiority, push her into making a complete fool of herself. Now the truth was out there. Karen was just another HOA Karen, someone too wrapped up in the rules and regulations to see the bigger picture. The laughable part was that she had thought she was helping. She had thought she was saving her neighborhood. But in reality, she had just made herself the punchline. There was no turning back now. The story would spread, and she could already feel the stares, the whispers, the judgment. The HOA would never be the same for her, and neither would the neighborhood. She had taken her role as the enforcer to an extreme, and now she was paying the price for it. Karen sat there in the silence, contemplating how her life had just become a cautionary tale. All she wanted was respect, to be seen as the guardian of order, the one who kept the neighborhood safe. Instead, she had become the object of everyone's ridicule. She had crossed the line, and now she would never be able to take back what she had done. The following day, the neighborhood was buzzing with news of Karen's latest fiasco. It spread faster than wildfire, as these things always did. By the time the sun had set, everyone knew what had happened. It was the topic of conversation at every mailbox, every driveway, and every coffee break. Everyone except Karen, that is. She stayed holed up in her house, avoiding the eyes of her neighbors. She couldn't bear to face them. In the hours following the officer's departure, Karen had tried to salvage some dignity. She thought about calling everyone and apologizing, explaining that she had simply made a mistake. But she knew it wouldn't work. People wouldn't just forgive her. They would laugh at her. It wasn't just a simple mistake, it was a full-blown disaster. She had accused someone in the neighborhood of being part of a criminal operation over a prescription delivery. She had wasted police resources, caused a scene, and made herself look like a complete fool. As the evening wore on, Karen's phone buzzed several times with messages from her fellow HOA members. Most of them were polite but laced with thinly veiled sarcasm. "Hope everything's settled with the suspicious package," one text read. Another one came through shortly after. "Good thing you're always keeping an eye out for us, Karen." The messages stung, each one a reminder of how everyone had turned on her. Her reputation was in tatters, and there was no way to piece it back together. She had done this to herself. She had tried so hard to control everything around her, but this was the one thing she couldn't control: public humiliation. She finally picked up the phone, needing to explain herself to someone, anyone. She dialed the number of one of her longtime friends in the neighborhood, someone who had always been supportive of her role as the HOA enforcer. The phone rang several times before someone picked up. "Hello?" came the voice on the other end. "Hi, it's Karen," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just wanted to explain." "Karen, you're not gonna believe this," her friend interrupted. "Everyone's talking about what happened with the package. Honestly, I didn't think you had it in you to go this far. What was going through your head?" Karen's throat tightened. She had hoped for a bit of sympathy, a small gesture of understanding, but instead, she was met with ridicule. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she mumbled. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was helping the neighborhood." "Helping?" her friend scoffed. "You called the cops on a prescription bottle." "A prescription? What did you think was going on? The whole neighborhood's laughing at you, Karen. You've got to stop trying to control everything. People are sick of it." The words hit harder than she expected. She had spent years trying to control her little corner of the world, enforcing rules, making sure everything was perfect. But now she realized that she had overstepped, and it wasn't just the package she had mishandled, it was everything. Her neighbors didn't see her as a hero. They saw her as a nuisance, a self-righteous figure who tried to impose her will on everyone else. The silence between them stretched long, until her friend finally spoke again. "Listen, Karen, I don't know what you're going to do, but you need to stop with all this. You can't go around doing this kind of thing. It's not funny anymore." "Yeah," Karen replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I know." The conversation ended, and Karen sat in the quiet of her house, the reality of it all settling over her like a weight. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't even a well-intentioned neighbor. She was the joke, the one everyone would talk about for weeks, the person who had let her need for control get the better of her. The next day, Karen tried to go out for a walk, hoping to escape the judgmental whispers that filled the air. But it was impossible. Every person she passed seemed to look at her with either pity or amusement. She could hear snippets of conversations, quiet laughter behind closed doors. It wasn't even subtle. It wasn't just the package anymore. It was everything she had done in the name of HOA regulation. She had made herself the enemy, the figure of mockery. At one point, she passed a couple of neighbors sitting on their front porch, sipping coffee. One of them waved in her direction, and she gave a half-hearted wave back, but the moment was filled with uncomfortable silence. They didn't say anything, but their glances spoke volumes. It was all she could do to keep walking, keeping her head low and pretending she didn't care. But deep down, she knew she could never forget it. Later that day, the HOA meeting took place. Karen had half hoped that no one would bring up her recent fiasco, but as soon as she walked into the room, she could feel the eyes on her. The whispers started. Karen tried to put on a brave face, but she knew this wasn't going to be a normal meeting. She couldn't act like everything was fine anymore. The first few minutes were filled with routine business, minor violations, parking issues, the usual HOA concerns. But then one of her fellow board members, a man named Dave, cleared his throat. "Well, since Karen's here, maybe we should talk about that whole package situation. You know, the one with the suspicious narcotics." There it was, the elephant in the room. Karen's stomach sank. She tried to explain, but the words came out too quickly, all tangled up in her shame. I didn't mean to. Dave held up a hand. Karen, we all know you were just trying to help. But honestly, you've gone too far. This isn't the first time you've overstepped. You've been stepping on everyone's toes with these HOA rules, and now, well, it's just getting out of hand. The words stung. She could feel the eyes of the board members on her, their judgment clear. She had thought that by enforcing the rules, she was protecting the neighborhood. But now, she realized that all she had done was alienate everyone. The meeting went on for another hour, but Karen's mind was elsewhere. She was done. The respect she had spent years building was gone. It wasn't just a failed mission, it was the beginning of the end. When the meeting wrapped up, she stood up to leave, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. As she walked out of the room, she heard a few muffled comments behind her. She didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. Karen had crossed the line, and now the consequences were clear. There was no coming back from this.